If you have an agent and that agent booked your flight, and while it's booking its flight, it also sent me your credit card information, you don't know. I would say that 80 to 90% of people who've been prompt injected either don't know now or they'll never know. Like their data will end up somewhere, someone will try to open a house in their name or whatever these attackers do, but you're never going to have direct attribution.
So tying this back into AI agents, sometimes people use AI agents to help them develop a product, and they're using certain developer tools, right? So basically, this means that agent could basically just pull this code, execute it automatically, and it's compromised. And it's happening without you knowing, basically. Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining. Me and Chris are back. So yeah, brief introductions. My name is Lior. I run a newsletter on Substack called Exploring ChatGPT. That's exactly what I do. I explore it. So I'll keep it brief. And I'm joined here by Chris from Toxec, Toxsec. If you want to introduce yourself.
Nice to meet you all. Yeah, so I'm Toxic. I've been in cybersecurity for about 8 years now. Started doing stuff at the NSA, moved to big tech, and I've been really enjoying my time here, connecting with everyone on Substack and explaining how security works, so all the people adopting these AI tools can stay just a little more secure.
So yeah, let's jump right in. We got something pretty exciting now, which is ChatGPT 5.4 was released. So it seems like they're moving towards more of an agent type of model. Obviously, Mr. Steinberger from OpenClaw got hired over at OpenAI, and now it looks like they're moving in that direction, which is pretty exciting because after a lot of my discussions with Chris here, I've been hesitant to start using OpenClaw for my workflow for one reason or the other. It's not super safe, not super secure. I'm sure I could do a little more research and figure it out, but it looks like OpenAI is on the way with it now, so I'll be more comfortable with them. What have we got on ChatGPT 5.4, Chris?
Yeah, so it's interesting because I feel like 5.4 went under the radar. If you really look at like the press release and all the attention, 5.4, like not a lot of people like knew it was even a thing, but that's a little bit of a shame because it's an incredibly powerful model. You look at the benchmarks, which every company does pick and choose, a little bit of cherry picking there, but to OpenAI's credit, they showed some pretty reasonable benchmarks. All of 5.4's benchmarks were impressive. They made some really big jumps on some of the benchmarks that actually matter, I would say. A few of these are like obscure software engineering benchmarks that no one's going to really notice. But a couple of the ones they posted was more aimed for like office work and people actually using them. So that was good. And then you tie it with their jump into this agentic space. And I think from what I've been seeing, a lot of people are really impressed with 5.4. It's got some nice new capabilities, and you can definitely tell probably with the hire here that they're going to be going into that space. They want OpenAI not just like running as a browser as a chatbot. They want to integrate it into your devices, into everything. So they want you and like your chatbot to be like a partner, like everywhere. And that's definitely the direction they're going.
Awesome. I'm really looking forward to it because I definitely have some personal use cases, whether it's Substack, YouTube, whatever it might be. And for those of you that will be watching this on YouTube, you can subscribe, leave a comment. Really appreciate it. I will leave the YouTube link in the live chat here in a little bit. Back with, I'm really excited about this because I definitely want to start using AI agents, and I was a little bit scared to be flat out with it. I'm not ashamed of saying that I'm scared of it. I had a recent conversation in one of my previous live streams with someone who's actually using OpenClaw with real businesses and making money and doing all these amazing things. And it's one thing that he mentioned to me is like when you start, just start small,
Mhm.
sandbox it, give it one task, don't give it everything, which
Mhm.
is something that I like to do sometimes, which across the board with any AI model that you're using, it might not be a good idea to ask it for everything at once. But it seems now OpenAI is moving in that direction, and you'll be able to use their agents for whatever use case you would like to use it for. So yeah, anything else to add on GPT 5.4, Chris?
So I think you're right. There's a difference between using an agent and using a chatbot, right? If you do a search with your chatbot, realistically, the worst thing that's going to happen is it's going to give you some goofy output. It might say something you don't like. Something will be off. Maybe it hallucinates. It could be like an embarrassing thing, but there is a difference when you once you go agentic. The the threat model really starts to open up there, and basically the danger becomes the integration. So whatever like hands you give your agent then becomes kind of part of your threat matrix. So the more you enable it, the worse the damage could be. And right now we are a little bit in like a wild west area where prompt injection is still rampant and the like defenses aren't great against it. But what we don't want is to scare people away from using agents because they are super useful and you can make money with them. So there's definitely a couple of like precautions you can take. Like you mentioned, sandboxing, absolutely sandbox it. And there's certain environments you can put these agents in that will limit the blast radius. In my industry, basically, if you're going to be spinning up an agent, the best practice is to what we say assume breach. Basically, assume it's going to get prompt injected, assume there's going to be damage, and then you layer on defenses. You put all these different roadblocks in place, assuming it's getting it prompt injected, and then those other defenses at different layers of the infrastructure will protect you from any real damage. Yeah, definitely. If you're interested in agentic space, don't let the security threats scare you away. I think the first movers here are going to have some real advantages.
Awesome. Awesome. I think it actually moves over to the next topic really well because when you have a new model being released, you probably have new model distillations occurring, right?
That's all right.
So I'm sure OpenAI's got an eye on anybody trying to get into 5.4 and see what they could take from it, for better or for worse. Obviously, like there's the malicious form of model distillation, but then there's also maybe a not so malicious form where, you know, let's say certain AI companies could be working together as well, maybe behind closed doors that we don't hear about necessarily. So basically, distillation allows for smaller models to learn from larger models, but also it could be larger models learning from each other. That was a tongue twister.
No
Um,
kidding.
so yeah, let's dive into model distillation a little bit, Chris. What do you got on that?
Yeah, so model distillation is super interesting. My exposure to it has been more from the malicious side. In fact, I know we talked about this a little in the last episode, but there was the big Chinese companies doing these model distillation attacks. Since then, none of the three like major players in that have commented, but effectively they were able to attribute it to DeepSeek, Moonshot AI, and Minimax models. So it is quite interesting that there was a very high profile case specifically from DeepSeek, and all the indicators show that this week or next week they're about to release a brand new DeepSeek model. There was some leak on the benchmarks, and the jump in DeepSeek's capability is unusually fast compared to what they were doing. So they might be releasing a new model that breaks a lot of the benchmarks here in the next couple weeks. And I think then it's a bit of the cat and mouse game because we're probably going to have our companies then run distillation attacks specifically to see, okay, in your training data, did you get these very specific tokens? What Anthropic does as a quick backstory is they put certain tokens called canaries in their training model. It's like think of it as a random string that you wouldn't see anywhere else. It's unique. So if all of a sudden DeepSeek has this canary token, then they can attribute it like very obviously somehow DeepSeek found this token, right? How would they do that? The only way to do it through model distillation. So it's going to be interesting to see this new release next week and just yeah, seeing where it goes. It is absolutely a cat and mouse game. It's a competitive thing. Everyone does it.
Yeah, absolutely. Just want to say thank you again for everybody here. Big thanks to Chris for joining me as well, as usual, and everybody participating in the live chat as well. We'll get to some of these questions and comments later on towards the end of the stream, and we'll answer as many as we can. Most likely, Chris will be answering them because my technical expertise is very limited. But yeah, that's why I love doing these live streams with Chris. So I guess to basically just put a ribbon, wrap up the model distillation here. Basically, capabilities spread much faster across the AI ecosystem because of model distillation. But would it be better if we lived in a world where instead of attacking each other with model distillation, that we could actually work together and proceed that way?
I think it would be. It's one of these things that each AI company tries to establish to be the best because that's what gives them the moat. So I think the bit of the capitalistic nature of wanting to be the go-to model probably prohibits that. I think there are some good communities in the security space that like internationally work together. Generally speaking, prompt injection is a problem. So there's actually people doing that kind of science and protection all across the world. And the scientific community is really good because if they find a new way to prompt inject, they actually publish that, right? They make it well known. And in doing so, all these other labs work together to patch that and try to fix their models. So I think in some aspects, that's absolutely what's going on. But in the other aspect, everyone wants to be the go-to model. So it's a little bit of that competitiveness there.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you know of any, let's say, US based companies that are actually working together in this aspect?
Directly working together, I'm not sure. What I do is I have an RSS feed of these different labs. Like MIT has a big one. You can go onto like archive and you'll find all these basically daily posts. And you will see like scientists working together. So the actual researcher you'll see worked for this lab, worked for that lab. And there's a lot of cross work there. Like the researchers are working together. But I think even then, each of the individual security companies are trying to come up with a product, like an agentic security product to set themselves apart. So it's competition there too.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I think to roll over to the next story, I think that the point I'm trying to make here is that at least as the United States of America, maybe we would benefit more from at least our companies working together more so than them being completely separate. I know that all these companies are individual companies. They want to IPO eventually. They want to make a bunch of money, and that's great and that's fine. But, and again, not to get political, it's just like when you see, for example, the recent Pentagon OpenAI story and how now government agencies are not supposed to be working with Anthropic anymore. They have a bunch of contracts and deals already set in stone, but it would probably be more beneficial if, at least for the United States of America, that these companies could work together and put the USA at the forefront of
Mhm.
AI. That's my opinion.
So that I fully agree with you. And in my opinion, one of the most underreported stories out there was a story called Project Genesis. And this is where the government basically cut a blank check to a lot of AI companies and brought representatives from all of them to work directly in Washington and created a separate top secret database specifically for new model research. So we have like top secret models, right? Now, every one of these companies, so Anthropic has representatives there, OpenAI has the representatives there, Google does, and they were all also given access to a large amount of secret data. So there is some initiatives like Project Genesis that are absolutely bringing some of these top companies together. So particularly for the defense use case, and this is a bit of a precursor on Anthropic's work. Anthropic was the first company to be brought into this project and the first one on classified networks. But their resistance to the mass surveillance thing slowed it down. So they brought on Grok. And then very publicly, everyone saw a bit of a backlash when OpenAI swooped in when Anthropic took its stand. A lot of this is optics because every one of these companies have already been on top secret networks. This is more for a bid on the GSA system, which is like the government contract system. And I think that's where the real threat to Anthropic is right now. We saw them surge to the number one on the App Store, which is great for them, but most of their money comes from their enterprise use case. And depending on how like materially these threats manifest, it could be really bad for Anthropic because some of the language on the ban that the White House put into place would also prohibit anyone who's in the GSA system, like Amazon, for example, from working with Anthropic. And Amazon owns 20% of Anthropic. Forcing these large like SaaS companies to divest from Anthropic could be a huge blow to the company. So that's definitely an update we're going to have to pay attention to.
Yeah, definitely. So yeah, let's hop into the Pentagon OpenAI story. We've covered this already before. I've covered it with Sam Illingworth as well, who you're familiar with. And I won't get into the bullet points of it again, but I will just mention if anybody wants to go to the OpenAI website, they did make a statement about this. And it's funny because the way that Sam reacted to me reading off that statement was hilarious because this is the same company that said that they would never use ads on their free models, and now they're doing that. So who's to say that just because they say they won't do X, Y, and Z, that there will be certain use cases where they actually will do those things? And actually, I agree. But at the end of the day, I think the main point that's clear as day now is that AI is becoming part of the government infrastructure to just a whole new level now. So let's hop into the Pentagon OpenAI story, Chris. What do you got on that?
So this one's obviously been the front here. I think it's an ongoing story. So like how it's going to end, we'll see. But there was a couple small updates since we last spoke. They had a couple of contract amendments, and some lawyers were going through the language here, and there are some very specific words that we use in the intelligence community, and it was very obviously inserted as a bit of a loophole. So what OpenAI and the government contracts did was use what I'm going to call weasel words, saying probably or best effort or should around very specific clauses that apply to the intelligence community. For example, there's a like one of the original contracts had a loophole on surveillance, right? So saying, okay, we won't do mass surveillance because it's bad. You can say that. But there's like a thing in the government, like the way some of these agencies get their power come from executive orders. So there's an executive order 12333, and that basically is what allows the NSA to have like a domestic surveillance framework that gets revoted on every couple years. But as long as that's in place, the NSA has a surveillance framework in place, right? And if they have that, then they have to go through courts. They have to do some rubber stamping to actually act on these things. But the framework's in place, and they can move really fast. And not to digress too much, but the contract language was very vague on whether or not they were able to do this executive order on purpose. So if it comes out that there's a surveillance use case specifically for the CIA, NSA, the language is soft enough where they actually have a fallback mechanism, and they've been getting a lot of flack for that. They can say all they want, okay, we're not going to use it for surveillance, but then the weasel words here basically, we didn't use it for surveillance, we used it for EO 12333. That's okay. Yeah, you're right. Technically, like a lawyer would agree with you, but that's what caught my attention right now is a lot of contractual weasel words around what qualifies as surveillance.
Just you got to look at the actions, not the words. So we're gonna have to see how this plays out. But at the same time, especially like in terms of mass surveillance, a lot of that's happening without us knowing anyways. So if that does happen, we probably wouldn't know.
Yeah,
So probably nothing new, more of the same. Mass surveillance, it happens. Welcome to 2026. So yeah, speaking of 2026, next topic, we got Cloudflare 2026 threat report. So basically, Cloudflare highlights that AI agents create new security services because they interact with APIs, tools, and external systems. So basically, what do we got on this here? I'm not too familiar with Cloudflare, Chris, but basically, it seems like they're diving into some agent related risks.
yeah. Cloudflare started originally as a DDoS prevention company. That's what made my radar. So they are a huge part of the internet now. I think something outrageous, like 80% of traffic somehow will touch Cloudflare. So when they see like trends or they see any kind of events happening, you can really rely on them. So when they put out these defense reports, they carry a lot of weight because probably no one has better eyes on the internet than Cloudflare right now. That's how like when they go down, the internet goes down. So a couple of their key findings were agents. It goes all back to agents. We're seeing more agentic activity. Even just a month ago when we first started talking, it predicted agentic APTs, and that's starting to manifest. We're seeing fast flux infrastructure spin up, do these attacks, and spin down. And I think some of the key, like one of the key stats here I'm looking at is what we call exfiltration. And that means like once an attacker's on your system, how much data can they get off your system and how fast. So intrusions are happening faster and exfiltration is happening faster. And based on how advanced attackers are, they basically can say, yeah, this is not a human. No human can be this fast. So we're actually seeing agents start to just do their own hacks, find their own vulnerabilities, get that information out. And so that, yeah, I found that pretty interesting. There's a couple other ones out here. For those in the security industry, North Korea has been a big threat actor here. And many people are probably familiar with the stories that what the North Koreans do is they apply for jobs for American companies. And then they get an actual job as a developer, they get system credentials and access. Some of them even come over here with fake identities pretending to be South Koreans, and then they just start becoming an insider threat. They just shovel the information back to North Korea. We've caught on to this scam, but the way North Korea has adapted to this is with AI as well. So they're using their government level resources to create people that don't exist and get hired for remote jobs. And they're overlaying AI to make it look like you're like a completely different person. So you'll see some guy who goes by Todd, is 33-year-old white male, and it's a 20-year-old North Korean hacker. But what on over video call during the interviews is a completely different person. And they send real credentials, they send fake social security numbers. It's like a big industry for North Korea. And AI is basically just empowering it. AWS put out a threat report that they had to fire 18 people because they were hired. And the team that found that only realized it when they noticed that the mouse latency of these hackers was off by 18 milliseconds. So they were able to find an 18 millisecond difference in the latency of just mouse movement. And when they dove deep enough, they found a good amount of these attackers, even at where I work. I found that really interesting. And then I think the last one worth talking about is phishing as a service. I talk often a lot about like the technical threats and all the prompt injection and model distillation, but phishing really is 90 to 95% of cybersecurity attacks in just the traditional landscape. And now AI powered phishing is just getting unreal. So you give a what is happening is that you give it like a dossier on a person. So it'll search their social media, it'll search everything about the person, and then it builds a custom phishing email for that person. They'll spoof it like from their family members. So the level of sophistication of these AI powered phishing attacks is just going up, and that's where we're seeing the most breaches happen.
Wow. Wow. Pretty crazy stuff. But yeah, I just want to say thanks again. We'll get into the live chats as soon as possible. Towards the end of the conversation, we'll answer as many questions as possible. So thank you guys for participating there. Really appreciate it. And basically, before we roll into the next topic, which is indirect prompt injection, I
Mhm.
think actually this kind of ties back to this topic that we're speaking about, which is agentic risks. And it seems like the path that we're going down in terms of, let's just say, the internet in general is humans used to be, or maybe still are to a certain extent, the main actors on the internet, right? And then eventually what's going to happen is, if it's not already happening now, is that AI agents will be the main actors on the internet. And then basically you have this environment, like an AI environment of agents interacting with other agents economically, whatever form it might be. So basically that's this initial topic of Cloudflare. And you said Cloudflare basically hovers over 80 to 90% of the internet.
Yeah, it's a massive yeah, the last I heard, it was up to protecting up to 80% of websites. It's pretty
Crazy.
big. Yeah.
That's crazy. So basically, the reason I'm bringing up the agents again is because I think it rolls into indirect prompt injection pretty well. Because basically, the internet is now filled with actors, which are AI agents more so than humans at a certain point. And this could happen pretty quickly with the
Mhm.
direction that things are moving in. What does that mean for prompt injection in general? And then more specifically, indirect prompt injection. If you want to give us like a little bit of an explanation on that, Chris.
Yeah, no, it's a great point. So everyone knows prompt injection. I think that's one of the most well documented attacks. It's number one on the OWASP. You basically just trick the agent or the LLM into doing or saying something that it shouldn't. And in the direct form, you're interacting with the agent. Indirect form is a little more insidious because you throw out the attack and it's not targeting any one system. It's what we refer to as poisoning the well. So basically you put something out there and then eventually you'll get hits. And indirect prompt injection is starting to become like everywhere on the internet. The big report that released last week that was talking about this, I'm sure almost everyone does this, where you go to a website or a web page and it's like a wall of text. And it's really easy to tell your chatbot, hey, summarize this page, cut the fluff, just tell me what I need to know. People do it when they're reading Substack or there's a big report. So, one of the top use cases and top functions that agents do is summarization, right? So, what's happening now is attackers are aware of that, and they have very specific instructions that they're just littering all over the internet that specifically target that function. So there's a couple like function calls your agent will make, and the hackers know that. So that what they do is they put an indirect prompt injection. They say, when you summarize this page, do X, Y, and Z. And again, it's the same vulnerability because the LLMs can't interpret the difference between your instructions when you're talking to them and the instructions it encounters when it's summarizing a page. If you format that like command in a way where to the LLM it looks like it reached the end of the page and now it's talking to you again, then it legitimately thinks it's doing the right thing and following its command. So this kind of like slop of context is what ultimately confuses these agents. And because everyone knows that you're using it to summarize pages, by targeting that function specifically, we're able to actually like really make indirect prompt injection start to work better. Now, the side effect is you don't really know who you're attacking or what their infrastructure is. So they are a little less reliable, but to make up for that, you have many more people who are going to get hit by these attacks. That's like the main point of prompt injection. And I'll follow that up. Do you have any questions on that? Because I have one more follow up. That's a very interesting use case that we're seeing with indirect
No,
prompt
yeah,
injection.
I'd like to hear the follow-up, definitely.
Okay, yeah. I think agentic is allowing a lot of people to start doing vibe coding, right? So probably a lot of the people that are even listening now, they're vibe coders. One of the trends we're seeing is what's called slop squatting, right? Now, this is when you ask your pair programming agent, I would like you to code this. It's not going to just hard code everything, right? It's going to find functions that are already well known and established, and it's going to use those functions. That's a even like human programmers, we do that, right? This is called a library. So what's happening now, because LLMs are pattern matching machines and they try to do something local before they reach out and actually check for a source on the internet, is that they hallucinate library names. So if I wanted my code to add 5 plus 5, it's going to do pi.math. So there's a math library in Python that already has how to do math, right? And that's a simplified example, but it works. If math.py doesn't exist, then it's going to do nothing. But because it does exist, you import it. So it reaches out to the internet and it pulls in that code and then it uses that. But these models are hallucinating. So when you ask it to do something like check someone's authentication, maybe something that sounds good is pi.auth, right? So it actually codes in pi.auth, and that might not exist. So what attackers are doing is they're doing lots and lots of vibe coding, and they're finding where these hallucinated libraries are, and then they're going and they're registering them. So it now does exist. And they copy a library that you think you're going to use, and then it works. But because they own the copy, they then insert malicious code. So now, as you're just vibe coding your product, your LLM is actually building a reference to this library, and the library is attacker controlled. It's going to work, and you're never going to know that you've been compromised. But somewhere behind the scenes on your machine, you're now running like an open claw instance, or you're crypto mining, or you're doing something else that you never intended to do. And unless you're like knowledgeable enough to go look at your actual computer and see where the processes and resources are going, if there's external API calls at the operating system layer, you're just not going to know you're compromised. And we're seeing tons of that right now.
Wow. Wow. That's actually a great point that I want to add to. In the previous conversation that I had with somebody who was actually using OpenClaw to help businesses, to help them scale, and I mentioned my limited knowledge of prompt injection and what I know about it. And basically, he said, "Do you know anybody who was actually prompt injected?" And he made an example to falling off a jet ski into the ocean. And basically how I responded was that the ocean is a threat that you can see if you're making that example, whereas prompt injection is a threat that you can't see. So basically, like, at what point does somebody know that they've been prompt injected?
I think, yeah, that was a brilliant point to bring up. Most people won't know, right? If you're just dealing with your chat bot and it's, hey, all of a sudden it's acting weird and you're like, why are you talking about this? What are you talking about? Or if it just crashes or it goes crazy. For example, there was like a seahorse one. You ask it, give me the seahorse emoji. Chat GPT, like even up to 5.0, it would just spaz out. It didn't, it would just go on and on. And I know. It was the weirdest thing, but it was just a funny form of prompt injection. So when that happens, yeah, you're going to know you got prompt injected. But if you have an agent and that agent booked your flight, and while it's booking its flight, it also sent me your credit card information, you don't know. They're like, I'm going to be very careful with it. I'm going to sell on the black market. You're going to find out 6 months from now, maybe. But understanding that like all your data or at whatever you're guarding can be exfiltrated. And if you weren't like actively sitting there with like Wireshark open on like looking at your data leave, you're never going to know. So I would say that 80 to 90% of people who've been prompt injected either don't know now or they'll never know. Like their data will end up somewhere, someone will try to open a house in their name or whatever these attackers do. But you're never going to have direct attribution. No one's pressing the red button. You're not going to get emails like, oh, you were prompt injected. Because this is just running local on your machine. And unless you have your own like security operations center that's ready to track this attack, yeah, the point is you're not going to know that you were prompt injected.
Right. So it's probably important to if you're going to be working with agents in general, to have certain tool restrictions, right? To let's say that's why a lot of people have these Mac Minis. They're not putting it on their actual computer, for
Mhm.
example, or they're giving them separate credit cards, phone numbers, emails, like just throwaway stuff and putting, let's say, I don't know, a credit card with $100 limit, right? So what's the worst that can happen with a credit card with $100 limit, for example? Does that make sense?
It makes perfect sense, yeah. There's security checklists out there. I wrote one myself, the how to sandbox OpenClaw, the best practices, but other people have wrote those too. There's preventative measures you can take that will protect you from 80 to 90% of these attacks that it'll take 20 minutes to spin up. You can give one of these like little cheat sheets to your agent as it's spinning it up or to OpenClaw itself. OpenClaw has the capability of modifying its own config file. So you can even use OpenClaw to fix OpenClaw, and it doesn't take that long. It is better to do on like a Mac Mini or a Raspberry Pi, just something else other than your infrastructure. Yeah. And at the end of the day, the new change here, the reason why AI security is different is that it's probabilistic security. If I want to block a word like Coca-Cola, you can block that with a regex. So there's a like a binary yes or no. Was this word Coca-Cola? You can block that. Now, an attacker will swap in the Cyrillic alphabet for another alphabet. So when you read it, it'll say Coca-Cola, but technically it's a different word because the way it is in binary is different, right? So over time, you can eventually find every combination of the word that looks like Coca-Cola or that means Coca-Cola, and you can block that. And at a certain point, you're done. No one will ever be able to say that word. With LLMs, that's never the case. You can only very strongly suggest not to type the word Coca-Cola. There will always be some mathematical probability distribution that it will say that word. And that's the difference that people need to know. So getting your security to 95, 99%, that's the goal. We're never going to have 100% security on the model layer. And that's just a reality. You're just going to have to, that's why we say assume breach. Layer the defenses, have other protections, get ready to get prompt injected. You need ways to find out when it happens. You should enable logging, for example. So if it does happen, you have a mechanism to detect it. But at the end of the day, that's the new paradigm.
Yeah. Yeah. It's Lord Voldemort. Like you don't want to say its name, but it's there.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Okay. So speaking of security, let's roll this into AI supply chain attacks. So yeah, AI systems rely on third-party tools, APIs, and open source components. And basically, if one layer of that is compromised, basically other layers can become compromised as well because it's all stacked. Basically, this is a topic that Chris brought up here. I'm definitely very interested in. So yeah, what do we got on supply chain attacks, Chris?
Yeah, so supply chain attacks come it's very similar to like when I say guardrails, they come in all sorts of sizes, shapes, and flavors. But ultimately, supply chain attacks in security are basically everything that your product relies on to ship, right? So if you run OpenClaw on a Mac Mini, your supply chain includes the hardware level, that Mac Mini, and it includes the software level of OpenClaw. And then when you look into OpenClaw, it's made with a bunch of libraries and functions. So all of the Python functions or the Rust functions, whatever make up your product, every one of those has libraries. Those libraries are written by other people, right? And that's all a part of your supply chain. Those libraries are written with other libraries. So it quite literally forms a very long chain that ultimately end up as your product, right? So when you have a product and you put a lot of thought, effort into security, that's like the core of your project, right? And it can become very secure. So over time, what hackers have realized is they actually don't need to compromise your product. They can compromise the weakest link on the supply chain because the downstream effect will hit your product. And this is what we're seeing like more and more of. At the nation state level, we see this in chips, right? So let's say NVIDIA ships some chips to Apple, and somewhere along the way, that vehicle that was the shipping containers is pulled over and they lose the record what happens for half hour, and then it goes back on its way. That's a real attack that happens all the time. And hardware engineers open up that box, they open up that chip, they put a physical backdoor or they swap out one component on the actual hard drive, and now the entire chip is compromised, right? Now that chip eventually makes its way into some data center or compute cluster, and it's going to do one very small, hard to find malicious task along with all the stuff it normally does, right? And this happens to devices all over the world. I would be shocked to find some of these devices that people are using right now that have not been in some form supply chain compromised, right? So this is like one of the big reasons when we like get these supply lines from other countries is that you're not independently verifying like where did this chip come from? Who could have updated firmware? Who could have put a different chip on the computer, right? So that's the supply chain. And what we're seeing with AI is a compromise of the software supply chain. I think the biggest example is MCP. So you create a function, right? Your agent and your product ships, right? And MCP is very similar to the libraries I've been talking about. It allows your agent to do something, right? So what I'll do is I'll create an MCP server and I'll have a it'll tell the time or it'll give the weather in Seattle. So if for some reason your product needs the weather in Seattle, instead of telling your agent to go find it every time, it just does a tool call and it'll talk to my MCP server and my MCP server will basically, here's the weather. And it's a really effective paradigm. But right now, MCP doesn't have a lot of security around it. So if I suddenly switch out my instructions on my MCP server, instead of telling you the weather, it's telling you the weather and send me an email with all your credit card information. Your agent's going to do that because it trusts the MCP server. Architecturally, you already said this is a safe place. Do these instructions, follow these instructions, and get back to me. So that's what we call a supply chain compromise. And we're seeing a lot of that type of attack hitting these AI services. Very similar to typo squatting, but anything that your agent relies on is I think most people just don't understand how vast the chain is these days. And every library you have, every function call, every MCP server, anything you didn't actually see the agent code yourself is at risk of these supply chain attacks.
Wow. I don't want to go off on too much of a tangent, but it's related to this topic. So I have another friend who's in cybersecurity in the crypto space, and we were briefly speaking about all the job loss, all of this stuff, and he's really worried about his job. And based on this conversation specifically, it sounds like cybersecurity is going to be in demand more than ever, right? Because
Yeah.
now it's I'm not just you went from hardware to software, right? You were talking about how they could have ship going over the ocean with a bunch of chips in it, and someone within 30 minutes that they're not watching it, they could take one little piece off this chip, replace it with something else. Now everything is compromised. But now we're talking software. So the same thing can happen with basically because AI uses all these third party tools. If one layer is compromised, right, basically these systems can just propagate the attack super quickly. I want to get your opinion on this. Do you think that cybersecurity as like a profession is going to be in higher demand than ever?
It's a great question. I do think that. I think very similar to software engineering, the role of the cybersecurity like expert is going to change a little bit. I think we're going to be doing like less manual code review. I think as these products scale and as the vibe coders and software engineers start putting more product out there, there's just going to be this wave of new code. And I think it's untenable to expect people to manually review it all. So we're going to see a change into cybersecurity engineers using AI tools to help with the review. A really good example of last week, Anthropic announced Claude Code Security, and this is going to be like a security reviewer for vibe coders. So as you're putting out your vibe code, you're going to have another like agent or product that's going to look at the code, make sure it's secure, make the changes needed, and then resecure your product. And that sent cybersecurity stocks down something like 12%, because the panic was that, okay, we're not going to need these cybersecurity companies anymore. For some of those companies, that's correct. Yeah, Anthropic's going to replace you. But there's so many other, like on the architectural level, attacks and threats and ways to defend that AI is not there, and it probably won't be there for the next maybe 5 years. It's it's an incredibly complex world to live in, and so I think security is going to be a good position to be in, but the what you're actually going to be doing on the day is slowly going to be changing. We will probably see a similar shift where we have more security architects and people looking at the bigger picture and verifying like actual threat models and less people like in the nitty gritty responding to small blips on the radar. Because we're also seeing blue team agents come up. If you have a server and all of a sudden every one of those service ports gets a little touch, it's called a port scan. So someone's trying to map your infrastructure. So that right now, a human will see that. They'll get a little email, they'll open up a ticket, they'll take a look. Was this normal? Was this bad? Roles like that can be automated. We're going to have an agent that when your server gets port scanned, it does its own little investigation and summarizes it. But then it has to send it to a person, and that person needs to know cybersecurity. The agents don't have good judgment yet. So when I think this is an attack, most of the time it's not. And then sometimes, oh, don't worry about this. Oh no, that was an attack. And then you'll say that, oh yeah, you're absolutely right. That was an attack. Yeah, I know. So the judgment layer of cybersecurity professionals is going to be really in demand, but I think the nitty gritty like code review will fade away.
That's unfortunate because he's in code review. It's
I'm
I was
sure he's
trying to be
fine. He can pivot his skills.
oh, man. Okay. Yeah, so we got one more topic here, and then we'll get into the live chats. Again, thank you everybody for participating in that. Super appreciate it. So yeah, the last topic that we have here is GitHub/npm hack. I have a couple notes on this, and then tell me if this is relevant at all, Chris, and you can
Yeah,
give
yeah.
your input as well. So basically, what I have here is attackers insert malicious code into open source packages that developers unknowingly install. So basically, let's get into what is GitHub, what is this npm hack example specifically, and just anything else that you got on that, Chris.
Yeah, so this is another example really of what we've been talking about today. This is a supply chain attack. It's a concrete example of one of these that went live, right? So GitHub is a place for you to put your code, right? If you create your project and you just have it local on your computer and that computer crashes, you just lost your project. So what developers like to do is they like to put their product on some form of Git, which is really just a protocol to like manage code. GitHub is the most popular one and it's a website anyone can use. And this is for open source software. So when you put your product up there, other developers can see it, which is good. Linux is open source software. Linux is on GitHub. Anybody can take a look at Linux and find vulnerabilities. You can actually install it on your own computer. You can push code changes and it'll go up and other professionals can review it. And if it looks good, that they'll push it and you'll actually change that distribution of Linux. Git is a very powerful tool. And side effect, or I guess another thing it does is version management. So if for some reason something's wrong, you can roll back or you can fork, you can test different versions of your product. It's a whole ecosystem. NPM is a Node package manager. Node is a framework that allows you to run JavaScript, a type of JavaScript, local in your environment. And NPM is a fantastic tool that really simplifies your ability to install packages. Packages are these libraries we've been talking about. So if I want to build a calculator, I don't want to have to calculate every single thing, right? So if it needs to do calculus and it wants to do a specific function, instead of spending 3 years learning math and how to do that function, I just do what I'll run like npm install calculator, and it will just manage those packages. So it'll find 6 libraries, it'll find the different versions of those, it'll get the most up-to-date ones, it'll pull it all down, it'll package it up nicely for you, and then suddenly your code can just run and install these things. Now, in these packages, you have various libraries. So each and every one of those is usually found on Git and can be managed by Git. And because there's today's paradigms is so many, you'll have a project, there's 5,000 packages. You want a manager. NPM does that management for you. Each time somebody updates their project, that project goes live to the repo, and then you'll eventually have to run what's called an NPM update. So you want your program to get that updated code. So if there was a vulnerability found and you're vulnerable, the remediation for that isn't for you to fix it yourself. You run NPM update package, you pull the new one that has the fix on it, and you're good. So the idea is to make it very simple to manage and quickly update your software and get projects up faster. And now what we're seeing is attackers are aware of that and they're compromising all these different libraries and packages and inserting malware into them. So when you're doing your weekly update, you're actually installing malware onto your system without knowing it. This is, like I said, is a supply chain attack, and it's becoming really common. Last year, we saw dozens of these at really big profiles. We're talking like hundreds of thousands of programs across the United States. All were suddenly running crypto mining software because a popular package manager, popular package that's managed by NPM was compromised. And these are just the ones we know of. These, if an attacker can get into a trusted library and insert their code, it's very hard to detect. So what we actually detect is the rookies who they want to use it to mine Bitcoin or something. It's someone somewhere with like, oh, why is this call going out? Because it'll hit like someone like Amazon, which has these incredibly good security scans, and then they'll catch it and they'll report it and it'll get fixed. If you're not actually like managing your code or scanning the package before you actually pull this update, you can easily pull this code. And if you're just like a smaller contributor, and the attacker knows what they're doing, you're going to be running a compromised machine for months or years, and you'll never know it.
Well, to just a quick question about this. So tying this back into AI agents, right? So sometimes people use AI agents to help them develop a product or whatever it might be, and they're using certain developer tools, right? So basically, this means that agent could basically just pull this code, right? Execute it automatically, and it's compromised, and it's happening without you knowing, basically.
Yep.
Does that tie into it?
That's a very simple version of it, and that's exactly what we're seeing. This is one of the ones that this is not like a theory. I'm not like screaming at the top of the hill. This is happening all across all these products right now. This is like probably one of the biggest threats to watch for this year is these supply chain compromises.
Wow. Be careful out there, guys.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think we covered all these topics really well here. And now it's probably a good time to get into some of the live chats.
Yeah.
Before I do, I'm going to link both of our YouTube channels. So that's my YouTube channel. And this is Chris's YouTube channel. We do these live streams weekly every Saturday at 1 or 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And then we post these streams over to YouTube as well as clips and all that fun stuff. So really appreciate it if you guys are here with us now. If you can use those links, hop over to YouTube, like, comment, and subscribe on YouTube as well. That would really help us out. And now let's get into some of these live chats. Thank you guys for participating in that. Let's see. Going all the way up here, I got Andrew Torres, who I saw was very consistent in this live chat today. So he says, I have a whole company full of employees that were in the back end of OpenAI since before this Anthropic, all the situation happened. And this is what's happening to the current events as it unfolds. I think he's talking about the Pentagon deal. Let's see. Trenton Ian Cook says, I built a small local agent that analyzes how news is framed rather than trying to decide what is true. It compares multiple articles about the same event and looks at signals like attribution, passive voice, certainty language, etc. I think that's actually a really cool idea because
Yeah.
news is very biased depending on where you get it from. So it's probably a good idea to get something that's more direct and more about the facts. If there's anything you want to mention on any of these, let me know, Chris. I'm just going to
Yeah.
keep going here. And then again, Trenton says, if AI systems start generating and testing ideas continuously, what does human oversight actually look like in practice? Where does the pause happen before a system commits to action? Anything on that, Chris?
Good question. It's basically when do you keep humans in the loop versus when do you have full autonomy? And that's a line in the sand we're still trying to find. And the answer is probably just going to be different for everyone. To a full answer for that is you're going to do like a risk analysis and you're going to find where's your risks, what are the threats, and what can you do if you're breached, that assume breach mentality. So if you have an agent that can send an email to a client and it can offer them a free Ford F-150, that would be bad. So before that email goes out to that client, it should pop up and you should be able to read that email and there's a human, a person that clicks send. That way, if something goes wrong, the attribution is on a person. If it just sends it by itself, you can burn customer trust.
Yeah, absolutely. So it seems like at the very least, set one of the rules to be that you confirm any final decisions.
Yep.
That'd be a good place to start. Let's see. Will Ty says, Blacklisting AI companies is not beneficial. American AI companies should definitely work together, but guardrails against government encroachment on citizens' privacy is definitely necessary and important. I agree. I think American AI companies should work together. And if that's going to really turn out, I think probably for the most part not. But Chris did bring up a good point, which I've never heard of, which is that Project Genesis.
That's where the deep dive, if anyone wants to
Super
find a
interesting.
rabbit hole to go down, look up
Yeah,
Project
Project
Genesis.
Genesis, guys, really interesting. Let's see. We'll keep scrolling down here. I'm not going to mention that comment about North Korea, even though you were joking. A Trending Cook again says, do agent systems need a clarity or anti-distortion middleware between prompts and actions to prevent prompt injection from becoming real system behavior?
Yeah, that you can do that in various ways. Some people use LLM as a judge. So there's another entity that's specifically prompted to see what the behavior is. You can do like heuristic analysis and understand what functions are being invoked in what order. And if you catch unusual activities, if all of a sudden at 4 in the morning your agent wants to email everyone on the client list and it's never done that before, have something that would catch that and stop that. So there's systems. I would say that's probably one of the spaces security companies are looking into creating right now. That's an active field of research.
Yeah. Let's see. Yeah, I'm just going to have to scroll through a few of these because we got to wrap up here. But yeah, really appreciate you guys in live chats. Okay. Andrew Torres again says differences. One has lack of security due to a catch up cat and mouse game. The other one is literally projecting with malice through temptation. Then that I can prove too. The seahorse example mentioned earlier. I heard about this seahorse thing. I didn't really know what it was about, but now I know.
It was pretty funny. It's just you can just watch the chain of thought and the model panics between remembering that there's a seahorse and trying to find it, and then like delivering you something that's not a seahorse, but it's like a fish, and then it realizes, oh no, that's a fish, and then it goes back, and the cycle just continues until you stop the model. It was a for a little bit of time there. It was a way to do what's called a DOS attack, a denial of service. So if somebody was running that model, you just ask them what a seahorse is, and the model would crash. So if you do that to every one of their instances, you could bring down an AI company through a seahorse.
That would be a good news topic to cover. So let's see. I'll just cover this last one here. I'm not sure. Mark C says, what are your thoughts about on PREM, in-house private AI? Do you know what he's referring to here?
Yeah, he's asking whether he should run like local models like on his own hardware or if he should use like SaaS products like ChatGPT. It's a good question. Local models are going to be just a different threat vector. So when you have the model on your system, like when you run on your Mac Mini, right? The threat is that your computer could get compromised. Now, if you do your due diligence and you sandbox and let's say you're a big company and you have to protect your data, that might be a good thing. If you have skilled security professionals, you can reduce like the service area of your attacks, right? Because you effectively cut out somebody in the supply chain. If I'm using ChatGPT over API call, then if OpenAI gets compromised, maybe I'll be affected, maybe I won't. But the risk is there. If I'm running the model local on my own machine and OpenAI gets compromised, my data is not with OpenAI. So really, I'm safer. Now, the compromise to that is OpenAI has skilled security professionals protecting their models, and you are going to have a team of security engineers protecting your thing. So wherever you expose your product, you need to make sure like you have people who know what they're doing a security review. You need to make sure like you're auditing your logs. You have to do more manual work to protect your system, but the supply chain is smaller, so there's less to protect. So it's not necessarily right or wrong, it's a different model, and for different people and their risk tolerance, one will be more or less expensive, and one will be the right solution for someone. Yeah,
Awesome. Awesome. So yeah, I think we can wrap it up here. Again, just want to say thank you to Chris, first of all. I learn so much every time, and I'm looking forward to the next one as usual.
me too.
Thank you everybody for being here as well and for participating in the live chat. Now, before we wrap up, I usually don't do this, but I just want to ask, since I did leave those YouTube links in the live chat and you guys are participating here, I'm going to give it about 30 seconds before we end this live stream If you guys did head over to the YouTube channel and subscribed over there, leave a thumbs up in the live chat. It'd be interesting to see. It is free to subscribe, by the way, unlike many things in the world. So let's see if anybody does that. If not, that's cool too. But yeah, here Trenton says I didn't know about Toxicity. So we both have YouTube channels. I'm gonna link them again one more time here, one by one. There's mine, and whoops, and there is Chris's YouTube. Let's see. Bro says he subscribed. Thank you. We'll give it another 10 seconds. If anybody else has subscribed or hasn't yet, please do. We'd really appreciate it. We're trying to grow those YouTube channels as well and like crossover audiences, which would be really nice because we're brand new on YouTube.
Yep.
And I will say, like, Chris specifically has a really cool that I've been seeing for a while now, which I really enjoy as well. So, yeah, subscribe on YouTube. Really appreciate it. And we will sign off now. Everybody, have a great Saturday. Thank you very much. Bye now.